today and praying for recovery.
Donna, who had open heart surgery. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Family of Pat Nelson.
Family of Pat Nelson. Patricia Nelson. Deborah? Denise, I'm sorry.
My oldest son, Brian.
Your oldest son, Brian. Okay. Yes.
Gilbert Anju, who is going home from the hospital with his hospice.
Gilbert. You said hospice care?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, yes, sir.
My wife Kay is back in North Carolina tending her critically ill sister Susan.
That is a prayer request and a praise offering that she is back there doing good work. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay, Goolsby.
Okay, Goolsby. Yes. All right. Let's spend a few moments in prayer. God, you have heard our prayers and our praises, and there are many more of both. We ask that you give us eyes that see, ears that hear, that we might be the answer to other people's prayers. Lord, we pray also for ourselves at this time, that as we study this last chapter of the book of John, help us to see clearly and hear you clearly. In Christ's name, amen. Okay, we're starting with one of my favorite stories. It's a fish tale. Fish story. And I am going to go through this a little bit differently than I have in the past. For this one, I'm going to go kind of verse by verse, a small section by small section. So as I go through, if you have a question, please just raise your hand and we'll stop right there and deal with it. Also, since this is the last study in the book of John, we're at the end of our time together. If you have any questions about the book, something that we haven't done, something that you have still are wondering about, make sure you let me know, and we will go back and take a look. Okay, we start with the fish story. Afterward, after what? After Jesus had appeared to the disciples with Thomas present, after he had alleviated all doubt with him, after he had said, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe," after that, sometime after that, Jesus appears again to the disciples. John says this is the third time that he appears to the disciples. Maybe there were others. He appears again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. This is another name for the Sea of Galilee. Another name for the Sea of Galilee. It's also called the Lake or the Sea of Gennesaret on occasion. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas called Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples were together. "I'm going out to fish," Simon Peter told them. They said, "We'll go with you." So they went out, got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. Okay, a couple of things. The sons of Zebedee are never mentioned in the book of John. One of the reasons is John, the beloved disciple, is one of the sons of Zebedee. The sons of Zebedee are James and John. Simon says, "I'm going out to fish." Just because he was the disciple didn't mean that he didn't still have to make a living. How did Peter make a living? He was a fisherman. So what did he do? He went out fishing. They said, "Okay, we'll go. You're going fishing, we're going with you." They fished, not like we do most of the time, but they fished with nets. The nets were made out of fiber. readily visible during the day, not nearly as visible at night. And so the time to fish was at night. So they went out fishing, they fished at night.
Visible to what?
Visible to the fish.
To the fish.
Yes, they're not as visible to the
I was
fish.
gonna say.
Yeah, not as visible to the fish. And that is the goal. You don't want the fish to see. So they go out and they go fishing and they caught nothing. Now, I want to set this up for you because I'm a fisherman. They fish all night during the time you're supposed to fish, at night. They catch absolutely nothing. The next morning, when it is daylight, some dude standing on the shore says, okay, pull up your net and throw it on the other side of the boat. Why would you do that? Okay, I'm going to say again, let me set this up. As a fisherman, when you're in the boat, your visibility is very limited. The sides of the Sea of Galilee are very steep. If somebody were 50 feet from the shore, they would have been 30 feet high. And if you're looking down in the water, you can see a lot better into the water. You could see shoals of fish. And though they don't know it is Jesus, they still would trust somebody standing on the shore looking down in the water. So just maybe this guy is telling us the truth. We've been out trying all night. Let's try one more set. Okay, here we go. Early in the morning, it was morning, Jesus stood on the shore. But the disciples did not realize it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? In other words, you ain't caught nothing. No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. So now we know, and they're about to find out, that it was Jesus. On another occasion, Peter had gone out and fished all night, and Jesus was on the shore when he was coming in. And Jesus says, okay, throw your net out again. And Peter says, Lord, I fished all night. I haven't caught anything, but because it's you, I'll do it. Now, this time they don't know it's Jesus, but he had the vantage point to look. So they took a chance, and they did. Okay, they couldn't haul in the net because of the fish. Then the disciple who Jesus loved, John, who never uses his name in this book, it is the Lord. He said to Peter, it is the Lord. As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Okay, so not only was it a catch of fish, it was a significant catch of fish. And the reason John goes to great detail about the significance of this catch, the large number of fish, guess what John's occupation was? He's a fisherman. And fishermen get enthused when they start telling fish tales. And so he is going to include the details. When they get to shore, they find that Jesus had started a fire. There were burning coals. He already had fish cooking and some bread. This is not a haphazard occurrence. Jesus had planned this. He got breakfast ready for his guys. I wonder where he got the fish. Again, that is a fisherman wondering where the fish came from. I say Jesus probably caught them. And he had some bread. I was asked earlier about the nature of what we were going to be like on the other side of death. Jesus was asked that same question by his disciples in one of the other Gospels after the resurrection, and he said, "You're going to be like me." In our passage here, Jesus has started a fire. He has seen fish. He has fish cooking on the fire, and he had bread ready to have breakfast with his disciples. Now, does that sound good? For on the other side, Jesus said, "You're going to be like me." I kind of like that. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you've just caught." I had an old uncle that used to brag about graduating from the 3rd grade. And quite literally, during the Great Depression, he had to drop out of school in the 3rd grade to help support the family. And he did. And he said, fish always taste better when you clean them in the water you catch them in and cook them on the banks of the same water. So here they've caught fish. He said, bring some and we'll cook them up right here, right now. Simon Peter climbed aboard, dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish. Large fish. This is a fisherman talking. They are large. He knows what he's talking about. How many are there? He doesn't say 150 something. It's 153. That's important. The first time I went walleye fishing here on the Columbia, I can tell you exactly how many fish Janine and I caught. We caught 13. And that was March a year ago. So, 153. This is important. Now, why is this important to us? Detail. Detail says, I saw it. I was there. This comes from an eyewitness account. And we'll talk about that in just a few moments. 153, yet with so many, the net was not torn. Another one of those fisherman's observations. Something out of the ordinary is going on here. We normally don't catch 153 fish, much less 153 large fish, much less the net not being broken. Something spectacular, miraculous is happening, and I'm letting you know this. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. I've always thought that was in and of itself a beautiful, beautiful thing. Because Jesus is not just concerned with the great, big, huge things of our lives. He's also concerned with the everyday, mundane things. Come and have breakfast. Don't ever think that when you go to God in prayer that you are bothering God. When I was first getting started in ministry, part of an evangelism team that used to go out to area churches and do services. And I was in charge of putting together this team, and there was one young lady who was a great friend of mine. Sang and played the piano. And the first 2 years, she often sang a song, give them all, give them all, give them all to Jesus. And one of the phrases in that was, give them all to Jesus, your shattered dreams, wounded hearts, and broken toys. Shattered dreams, wounded hearts, and broken toys. Because God is concerned about all of those things. And that is what the writer here is communicating. Come and have breakfast. None of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took bread, gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. Remember in the walk to Emmaus, on the road to Emmaus, that Jesus was with them all day long. They didn't recognize him. But when he broke bread and gave it to them, immediately they recognized him. Here it is. They already knew who it was. But there was something special about Jesus breaking the bread and giving them the fish. Remember, he did that in the feeding of the 4,000 and the feeding of the 5,000 as well. He says this is now the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. Okay. Questions? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I read, I don't have the source, that the 153 also corresponded to the 153 Roman provinces at that time, which was kind of a...
The observation was 153 was the number of Roman provinces at the time. Yeah, could be an indication. I've given all these to you. Yeah. All right. Other things? Okay. Now this one, I'm going to read the first portion of it, and then we'll go back and take a look at it, and then the last section. Peter is reinstated. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. He said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. I tell you the truth, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. He said to him, follow me. Okay. Remember, how many times did Peter deny he knew Jesus? 3 times. How many times does he give him a chance to say he loved him here? 3 times. And each time it is a little bit different. It's not significantly different, but it is a little bit different. Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these? Now, there has been through the years a lot of debate about what he means, more than these. When he was debating with Jesus about whether he would deny him or not, he said, even if everybody else forsakes you, I will not. Here Jesus says, do you truly love me more than these? That might indicate the other disciples. Now, note that Peter does not say, I love you more than these. Yes, I love you more than these. He says, I love you. He doesn't make that qualitative judgment. One of the things that it is really good to learn is don't ever compare yourself to someone else. Don't do that. Don't. Good, bad, or indifferent. Don't ever compare yourself to someone else. We are all at different points in our faith. faith journey. All of us are at different points in our faith journey. So just remember that. Don't ever compare yourself to someone else. It's if God is happy with you, you be happy with you. And if God is not happy with you, you do not be happy with you. You do you. Don't worry about where someone else is. One of the things you're going to hear me say on Sunday is the church is healthiest when we have people at all different stages of faith development. When we have people who are just getting started, and we have people who have been Christians and dedicated Christians for an eon. Because we can help one another. The new Christians can help the older staid, I won't say boring, but staid Christians regain some fire and some enthusiasm. And the staid Christians can help the new converts to chill. It's going to be okay. Just chill. It'll be all right. We need people at different, so don't ever compare yourself to people at other stages. Jesus said, "Do you truly love me?" More than these. It could also be, remember, he had just taken the boat out. And we fishermen get pretty attached to our equipment. And I know about the 1st of February, I'll get all my rods and reels out and start playing with them. Changing the line and sharpening the hooks and making up some rigs and making sure everything's all right in anticipation. Maybe that Jesus is saying, "Peter, do you love me more than this stuff?" We don't know what Jesus meant when he said, "Do you love me more than these?" But he gave Peter an opportunity to say, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Feed my lambs." Now, a lamb is a small sheep. There may be some significance of that. Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you truly love me?" He didn't say more than these, but do you truly love me? He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." How did Peter know that he loved him? Because Jesus had known that Peter would deny him 3 times. He said, you know that I do truly love you. And we say, well, how can Peter love Jesus when he denied him 3 times? When the temple guard came out to arrest Jesus, and that whole big army came out to arrest Jesus, who was it that pulled out his sword and cut off the ear of the high priest's servant? Peter. It wasn't until Jesus told him to stop that he stopped. So he's saying, Lord, I may have messed up, but you know. Jesus has given him an opportunity to be restored. A 3rd time, he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a 3rd time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. In other words, and I know you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. I tell you the truth, that when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. And when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said, follow me. The ancient church believed this indicated that Peter too would be crucified. That this indicated when he said, stretch out your hands, that stretched out in crucifixion. They believed that this is the kind of death by which Peter would bring glory to God. At the end of this discourse, Jesus says emphatically, and I wish you could get the Greek tense here, because it doesn't say follow me, it's follow me. You follow me. Don't worry about anything else. You follow me. I read this passage and I remember a couple of scenes from my last church. We were privileged to have we had a fellowship area about the size of this room and the other room, and we had a big fellowship time after both of our services, and then the second service almost every Sunday we had 50 or 60 kids. And you have 50 or 60 kids in a room the size of these two, and plus the corresponding adults that go with that many kids, it can be absolute chaos. And we didn't ride herd on our kids. We let them run, and we filled them full of cookies and punch, and got them all hyped up on sugar. And by the end of the fellowship time, sometimes it got a little bit rowdy. But I can remember we had one little guy whose name was Damon. Sometimes we called him Demon. But Damon's mom could see something from one end of that building to the other, and she would say, Damon! And he would freeze. Because there was a difference between Damon and Damon. There's the mom voice. And he knew mom voice. And that means stop now. That's the emphatic. I'm through playing. Stop. That is the emphatic Jesus uses here. He's saying, okay, Peter, you say you love me. You're reinstated. You're my guy. Now, follow me. And that means without hesitation, reservation, or qualification. Wherever I lead you, whatever I call on you to do, you follow me. Okay, questions on that? Observations? Something you would like to add? Yes, ma'am.
Was it at all common to crucify someone upside down?
It was not common. The question is, was it common to crucify someone upside down? Because legend has it that Peter says, I'm not worthy to be crucified like my Savior, and they crucified him upside down. It was not common. But that legend says that is how Peter was crucified. We don't know that. By the way, legend also says that Peter and Paul died about the same time. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any idea how old he was?
The question is, do we have any idea how old he was? No, ma'am, we don't. The implication is that he is younger than Jesus. We think of 30 as being young. In our society it is. But take under consideration that the average age of death was 36. People didn't live long.
Would you guess that all of them were younger than Jesus?
Probably. The question is, were all of them younger than Jesus? We don't know. But the probability is they probably were. Yes, Norm.
I had the impression Paul lived till he was about 70.
Paul lived till he was about 70. There's some indication of that he lived to be a ripe old age. That's kind of hard for this group to think about, isn't it? That he got lived to be. We was absolutely ancient at 70. We have come a long way, haven't we? If the average age of death was 36, well, think about it like this. a young man was, after he had his 12th birthday, was considered a man. Women too. And they probably, we have 2 stages. You remember Mary? We talked about this with Mary and Joseph, and they got engaged, but they were considered to be married for a year. That probably happened at 13. Probably married at 14. That is absurd by our standards, but if you think about that, they didn't live past 35. Now you understand. Robin, you had your hand up.
Well, there's some people that live to be 400 and even more. So when they live that long, God had his hand in that? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and you'll note that was early on, and that is a completely different story. Maybe one day we'll get there, and I'll talk to you about that.
Promises.
Promises. Marcia, I saw your hand up too.
Same thing as I was.
Okay, yeah. That was several thousand years before this. And again, there's some theories about that. All right, let's look at that last section. Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved was following them. This was the one who had leaned back against Jesus at the supper and had said, "Lord, who is going to betray you?" Then Simon, when Peter saw him, he asked the Lord, "What about him?" Jesus answered, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me." Because of this, rumor spread among the brothers that this disciple would not die. But Jesus did not say that he would not die. He only said, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you?" This is the disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true. Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. Okay, so Jesus is following Peter. Peter is following Jesus. He turns around and he sees that the disciple whom Jesus loved, that being John, was following as well. And he said, "Well, if you're asking this of me, what about this guy?" And Jesus says, "What is that to you?" What is that to you? You don't worry about him. You worry about you. And then he uses hyperbole. If I didn't want him to remain until I come back, what's that to you? But he didn't say that he would. He said, "If I want him to." In other words, you don't worry about him. And that's what I was saying earlier. Don't worry about other folks. You worry about you. You do you. You do what you feel like God has for you to do. Don't worry about that. Now I want you to look at verses 34 and 35. This is the disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. What disciple is that? That's the one who leaned back on Jesus' breast at the Lord's table. This is the one that Jesus loved. We know that person to be John. He is the one who wrote these things down. So he wrote this account of Jesus' life. But you'll note there is another editor involved in this. Probably a church involved in this. It says, "We know that his testimony is true." So there was someone that was responsible for taking the writings of John and collecting them and putting them in the form that we have them. So we have multiple people involved in the composition of the book of John. But John is the one who gives us the account of Jesus' life and those eyewitness things that happen. That's the reason the story about the fish is so important, because he has those eyewitness details to remember. I remember, I confess to being a fisherman. I remember the night that my dad caught what we used to call a Jewfish. These days it's not called a Jewfish, they call it a Goliath grouper. And I remember even at 6 years old, that fish weighed 67 pounds. Not 65, not 68, it was 67 pounds. And I really remember that 2 weeks later, I caught a shark that weighed 67 pounds. Not 68, he hasn't grown to 70 yet, but he was 60. Those eyewitness details that you remember. That's the reason these things, they don't add significantly to our spiritual growth, but they give us some confidence that the person who is writing these things down saw them occur. And that makes a difference. That gives us a lot more confidence in what is said. We know that his testimony is true. And this is the commentation from the compilers of this gospel. Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. We have but a snapshot of Jesus' life. Now think about this. Probably died somewhere around 32, 33 years of age. And we really only have a snippet of his birth, his early life, and we have 3 years of his life. That's it. That's all we know. But these were written, if you go back to the end of chapter 20, the writer says, Jesus did many other miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. What we have is sufficient for salvation and for Christian living. We have enough. In other words, we have what we need. It's not a matter of not knowing enough, it's not doing what we know. Right? It's not, we don't, would I like to know more about the life of Jesus? Yeah, I would. There's an interesting book, and I wish I could pronounce the name. It's a Greek name, where a writer in the 2nd century A.D. took the 4 Gospels and compiled them into one writing. He took out all of the duplications, and he had just the one story of Jesus' life. And I wish I could remember it, but it's an interest. Look it up. If you'll send me an email, I'll give you the name, because I can look up the name, but I can't pronounce it. It starts with a D. Okay, questions, observations, complaints. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a story behind your shirt?
Story behind my shirt. There is a story behind my shirt. Most of you can't read it. Some of you didn't notice it. Some of you came in too late. A couple of weeks ago, I said, I am going to get a shirt or a hat that says, love them all, let God sort them out on it. Somebody took that very seriously. They found on Amazon a shirt that says, just love everyone. I'll sort them out later. Signed, God. Just love everyone. I'll sort them out later. God. They bought it on Amazon shipped it to me, and I have no idea who did it. Absolutely no idea who did it. So it's just a package in the mail. I opened it up, and this is the shirt. Another funny that goes with this. My last church, I said one day I'm going to have the guts to put a sign out in front of our church that says, "This is a hospital for sinners, not a museum for saints." The next week, there was a sign about that high in our garden that said, "This is a hospital for sinners and not a museum for saints," and it's been there for 14 years. And every couple of years, they take it out, whoever did it, and I still don't know who, and they highlight the letters again and put it back in the garden. Okay, other things?
You need to be careful what you say.
Oh, I got to be very careful what I say. Oh, yeah. I know another funny story. I was asked often, if I got on pants, I got on boots. And whether it's dress pants or fishing pants or whatever, I wear boots. And somebody asked me if I was a cowboy because I wore cowboy boots. And I said, as close as I want to get to a cow is a T-bone steak. The next week, somebody got me 12 T-bones.
T-bones.
T-bones, steaks.
Oh, the steaks were
The steaks were with them too. Yeah. All right. Yeah, you got to be really careful what you say. Okay, I do have some funnies for you today. These are kids. A kindergarten teacher was observing her classroom of children while they were drawing. She occasionally walked around to see each child's work. As she got to one little girl who was working diligently, she asked her what she was drawing. She replied, "I'm drawing God." Teacher paused and said, "But no one knows what God looks like." Without missing a beat or looking up from her drawing, the girl replied, "They will in a minute." Sunday school teacher was discussing the 10 Commandments with 5- and 6-year-old kids. After explaining the commandment to honor your mother and the father, she asked, "Is there a commandment that teaches us how to treat our brothers and sisters?" Without missing a beat, one little boy, the oldest of a family, answered, "Thou shalt not kill." One day, a little girl was sitting and watching her mother do the dishes at the kitchen sink. She suddenly noticed that her mother had several strands of white hair sticking out in contrast to her brunette head. She looked at her mother and inquisitively asked, "Why are some of your hairs white, Mom?" The mother replied, "Well, every time you do something wrong and make me cry or unhappy, one of my hairs turns white." The little girl thought about this revelation for a while and then said, "Mommy, how come all of Grandma's hairs are white?" A teacher was giving a lesson on circulation of blood. Trying to make the matter clear, she said, "Now, class, if I stood on my head, the blood, as you know, would run into it, and I would turn red in the face." "Yes," the class said. "Then why is it that while I'm standing upright in an ordinary position, the blood doesn't run to my feet?" The little fellow shouted, "Because your feet ain't empty." Oh. Okay. The children were lined up in the cafeteria at a Catholic elementary school for lunch. At the head of the table was a large pile of apples. A nun made a note and posted it on the apple tray. "Take only one, God is watching." Moving further along the line, at the other end of the table was a large pile of chocolate chip cookies. A child had written a note, "Take all you want, God is watching the apples." Last but certainly not least, you have to be careful what you expose children to. A mother was concerned about her kindergarten son walking to school. He didn't want his mother to walk with him. She wanted to give him the feeling that he had some independence, but yet know that he was safe. So she had an idea about how to handle it. She asked a neighbor if she would please follow him to school in the morning, staying at a distance so he probably wouldn't notice her. She said that since she was up early with her toddler anyway, it was a good way for them to get some exercise, and so she agreed. The next school day, the neighbor and her little girl set out following Timmy as he walked to school with another neighbor girl he knew. She did this for the whole week. As the two walked and chatted, kicking stones and twigs, Timmy's little friend noticed the same lady was following them as she seemed to do every day all week. Finally, she said to Timmy, "Have you noticed that lady following us to school all week? Do you know her?" Timmy nonchalantly replied, "Yeah, I know who she is." The little girl said, "Well, who is she?" He said, "That's Shirley Goodness," Timmy replied, and her mother, Marcy. "Shirley Goodness? Who is she and why is she following us?" "Well," Timmy explained, "every night my mom makes me say the 23rd Psalm with my prayers because she worries about me so much. And in the Psalm it says, 'Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life,' so I just guess I'll have to get used to it." If you don't want an answer, don't ask a kid. As you go into your world, remember to follow Jesus. Don't worry about what other folks do. In Christ's name, amen.